So we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Chris here. Chris, you've been behind a super impactful company in the sports space with sports technology and betting with Simplebet. And what you guys have done is built this backbone of what the industry standard should be to be able to access this type of betting and to power it along for any type of user, whether it's commercialized with major companies or for individual ones. And we've seen these applications with Better, with the sports betting app, with Caesars. So it's really been widespread. And it was very much a revolution for the space to have a technology like this to open up betting to many different types of categories. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Well, I'm appreciate you having me on and just putting me in the first sentence of Legends and Leaders. I didn't know that.
So how, Chris, did early on did your passion for business, technology, and then sports and betting specifically, how did that start?
I am on the I'm closer to the end of my career than I am in the beginning. When I first got started, when I graduated college from Penn State in 1986, I didn't really have any idea what I was going to do, right?
Mhm.
And I thought I was going to still be competing as a wrestler, and I was on the ladder to try to compete in the Olympics, and then that all got short circuited by my shoulder injury, and so I just once I knew I was going to be done competing in the late '80s, I said, all right, well, I want to move into a career now, and I had gotten a degree in marketing. I wanted to be in business, and so I just decided I want to be in the sports industry, and I started with a friend got me to a friend, and I ultimately got in front of the folks at NBC that were looking for essentially a production assistant in the sports promo department. And I started working for $6 an hour. When I was whatever it was, 23, 24 years old, and I was determined at that point to just learn everything I could learn about the sports business and particularly the sports media business. So I started in production, then I moved into programming, then I moved into sales and marketing, and then I went to sports marketing at Nike, and then whatever it was, 12, 13 years into my career, I decided I want to take a shot at something. And that's when I came up with the idea for the first ever 24-hour college sports network, college sports television. And
Mhm.
I left Nike, which was a great job at the time, and decided I wanted to go for it. And, we got after it in the early 2000s and raised about $100 million of private equity money and launched the network. And 5 years later, sold it to CBS, now the CBS Sports Network. And so all that happened in a relatively compressed time frame
Mhm.
for me starting my career. It was, all of that was 15, 16 years. And then I realized, all right, well, what do I want to do next? And, it was a wild ride operating a business, a startup, and raising capital and exiting. And then I just decided didn't want to do an operating role and got into advisory and investing. And I've been doing that for, almost 15 years now. And then, like you said a minute ago, a little over 6.5 years ago, partnered up with Joey Levy, who's now the co-founder, CEO of Better, right? The sports book and media company. And another partner of mine, Scott Marshall. And the three of us founded Simplebet. And quite frankly, I didn't know much about betting and sports betting, right? I did know about data and the importance of data and engagement and, from the media side, right? So I got into Simplebet and the technology business around betting and fan engagement, really coming through the lens of how to drive more viewership and more engagement from a media perspective, right? Because that's really where all of the economics are in the sports business, or the vast majority of them are around media and media rights. So, Adam Silver and the NBA just, tripled their rights fee with their new deals with ESPN and NBC and Amazon, right? So a lot of that is all coming through, the media ecosystem. And so the foundational element of Simplebet and the technology behind what we built was really designed more coming from the engagement side and the value into the entire ecosystem of sports. And, that I've learned quite a bit along the way over the last 6.5 years of this journey, more than I care to know about betting. But ultimately it still comes down to driving engagement and building a technology that was really super complicated to build. So you got to go, raise a bunch of money, hire the best people and best engineers and the best operators, if you will, of this type of technology, and then get it distributed into the ecosystem. In our case, to sports books and media companies. And so, a little bit of a circuitous path to get there, but it worked out well. As you said a minute ago, we just reached an agreement last week, as a matter of fact, to sell the business to DraftKings.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So, Chris, how important would you say your background in media and sports media was to building a sports betting company?
I would say critically important because, like I said, I didn't know a whole lot about betting, and it's not something. I'm like most people, right? Casual bettor, like do Super Bowl boxes or March Madness brackets. I was never one to look at a line on a game and place a bet, right? Maybe a friendly bet with a friend or what have you. So, I think the media aspect of my whatever 35 plus years of being in this business was really the driver for me. But it ultimately, I think, was really important because I have a lot of relationships at the league levels, right? Where if you just think of a pyramid, right, the top of the pyramid are the rights holders, right, that create the programming, right, whether it's an NFL game or an NBA game or a college football game, and everything goes down, to the bottom of the pyramid, right, which is where all the consumption occurs, right, and that's at the user level, the fan level, right, and fans want to be more engaged and they want to interact with their passion, and that's ultimately where betting fits in.
Hmm. So, how you mentioned the technology was complicated to build. How does the technology work? What was the first version like? Like what even went into this?
Well, it took, the idea from the very beginning, right, was to be the leader of um, in-play gaming and in-play betting, right, where you had to create these fast-moving markets that we otherwise, coined the term. This was over 5 years ago, called micro betting, right? So every moment of every sporting event matters, right? It is a betting opportunity. It's an engagement opportunity. So in a baseball game, for example, there's 300 pitches, right? And usually, how many 75 at bats in a game, right? So you have all these markets, hundreds of markets uh, that that then can be turned into thousands of markets because each pitch might have three or four different markets, right? It occurs every 15 seconds or every 18 seconds now. So we knew that that the future of betting, if you look over in Europe, about 70% of the handle, and betting's been around for decades over there. About 70% of the handle in Europe is called in-play betting, meaning like bets that occur while a game is going on, which is obviously mostly in sport like soccer, right? So over the course of a 2-hour game, people are betting, right? And it's typically the lines that are changing about wins and losses and number of goals as the game is going on because the odds change throughout the game. And, soccer isn't a great micro betting sport, but we believe that the US sports like football, baseball, and basketball, because of the flow and the cadence of the game, has all these opportunities. Like, in a basketball game, there's over 200 points in a game, right? In a baseball game, there's all those pitches and at bats. In a football game, there's all those plays and drives. And so to build the technology required to create a market, suspend a market, reprice a market, and result a market all through automation is really complicated,
Mhm.
right? So you're constantly opening and closing markets and settling markets in very quick time frames, and in order to do that, you have to have a robust set of historical data, and then you have to have live incident feed that comes out of the stadium or the arena, right? That's high quality, that's very accurate, right? That you can then take all that, and our technology is able to take all that plus other signals like the weather, the wind, the surface of the, like, is it a grass field, or is it a turf field? Is it an open air stadium? Is it a dome stadium? You have and then all these other signals that go into creating that through with machine learning and AI that allow you to do that like that, right? That is really super complicated. And by the way, I'm not the CTO or the machine learning engineers, the data engineers that actually had to build it. But suffice to say that we have an all-star team of people that, have worked on that from the very beginning. And it took a couple of years at least to develop. And then finally getting it distributed is just as hard, because you have to do tech integrations with all these tech platforms, because FanDuel's platform is different than DraftKings platform. It's different than MGM's platform. So there's just a lot of engineering required to do all this and do it in a fast, in a short amount of time with the speed and accuracy necessary to, create a product like this.
Mm-hmm. And what have you learned now, Chris, from over 100 million bets done? I mean, you guys have had so many bets done on the platform. How is your knowledge? Like, what have you taken away from that most?
It's like a lot of these businesses today, especially in our world, right, of tech and AI, right, is the more data you have, the better of a product you can build, right? So as it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, so now that we're 6 years into the journey, we've been live with our product for 4 years, and we've taken tens of millions of bets, right? And we know the user behavior around all this stuff. So the more and more data you collect, like the more flexible you can build the technology, right? So that it ultimately, just like in the media business, right, we're moving from a world that used to be the mass media business, right? We had three networks.
Mm-hmm.
You're too young, right, to remember there were only three
Aware.
networks. But when I was watching sports 40 years ago, there was only three places to watch it, right? And now you have all this distribution that's been built, right? Cable distribution, the broadband and the internet and wireless, and so we're moving from what used to be mass media into personal media, right? And so personalization and technology has really disrupted how people consume content, in particular live sports content, right? So you're now into a world where everybody can decide what they want to watch, when they want to watch it, on what device they want to watch it, and they can personalize it, right? You can, well, I only want to watch this camera angle, and I only want to listen to this audio feed, and I want to be able to bet on it, and I want to be able to buy merchandise on it. Like, so you can literally tailor your needs to what it is that you want to consume and what you want to watch. And so that transition, right, is occurring like in real time. And it used to be that 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, right, there really was most of the consumption were on television networks, like broadcast networks or cable networks. And now you're rapidly moving into a world where people are cutting the cord, and there's cord cutters, there's cord nevers. Probably folks in your generation that don't own a cable TV
Mm-hmm.
subscription, and you have 5 different apps, and you're watching this, and you're sharing it on social, and you're talking to your friends, and you're betting with them in real time. And so just the whole transition into personalization is really where technology, in particular sports betting, sits right now.
Mhm. And were you surprised, Chris, by some of the ways people wanted betting to be personalized? Because there's a lot of different things you can bet on within a game, but maybe some of them stood out to you more than others.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to what, like if you think about the, the younger generation, right? There's these fast feedback loops, right? And we thought and believed, and I think correctly so, 6 years ago, that the U.S. sports market betting market was going to be much different than the European or Asian or Latin American market, in that U.S. sports just have a different cadence. And we were convinced that the predominant way that people would bet in this country, in this market, would be on fast feedback loops, right? Like I got 4 young kids. They don't watch TV,
Mhm.
right? They watch everything on these things, right? And it's quick time frames, and it's a TikTok video. It's an app that they're watching. Whether my son watches with those crazy guys that um, that hit the golf balls with the baseball bats on, and you'll know who I'm talking about.
Too perfect.
Yeah, Dude Perfect. Like he watches Dude Perfect all. I mean, that's what these kids are watching, right?
Yeah.
So he can't legally sports bet right now, but the idea of this fast feedback loop and instant gratification we thought was going to be the wave of the future, and that's kind of the way it's all playing out over the last several years. Is people like they don't want to wait around 2 or 3 hours to know whether they won or lost. They want to know whether they won or lost in the last 2 minutes.
Mhm.
So, and they're not going to sit there and watch a 3 hour baseball game, right? They'll come in and out of it. They'll be playing Madden on the other, my son's playing Madden. He's got the Yankee game on his iPad while the game is going on, right? So the fast feedback loops and the instant gratification, we thought that that the sports in the United States were really built for that, and and so we kind of ran into that trend, and we're as a result we're years ahead of most on creating this type of engagement.
Mhm. I mean, now there's like you were very ahead of the trend on instant gratification and taking advantage of that. Now there's also platforms that are trying to enable you to bet on stuff that is really out there, not even just sports related. For example, like Polymarket. Where do you see the betting market shifting towards? Like, do you think that that's going to be a continuous trend?
Yeah, you mean outside of sports
Yeah.
and into like
Anything.
politics and music and the
Mhm.
news, and I think longer term that's probably right, but the difference is that in order to do it, like I was saying earlier, you still need like a lot of historical data, but you also need like a live and a very accurate live incident feed that can help you price the markets, right? Sports is a natural because there are all these data points that are very detailed and are collected by the leagues themselves and distributed through companies like Genius and Radar and IMG that invested into the technology to build the data feeds. I think doing that outside of sports, like someone's gonna have to figure out how to do that, right? And how you come up with the data points, whether it's in live news or it's in a music awards show. You have the integrity issue, right? You can't, like, the
Mhm.
leagues are very uh, as they should be, very super vigilant on integrity. Of course, we want that to be the case too, because you don't want people thinking that any bet and any market is rigged, right? So I think it becomes a little bit more difficult in non-sports type uh, betting. Uh, so we're just trying to solve one problem at a time. Sports was where we started.
You did well at sports.
Yeah.
So, you just recently, you now have entered into an agreement to get acquired by a company that you were also servicing a lot. How do you see this now, like, this acquisition, like the relationships playing out going forward with that? And like, where do you see your role after this acquisition occurs?
Yeah, since our deal hasn't closed yet, there's not a lot I can say about it. But the obvious point is, right, we've had, DraftKings is one of our, I think it's our second longest customer relationship, right? So we've been in business with them since virtually the beginning,
Mhm.
and the product has done extremely well in the DraftKings platform, and they have learned how to best use it and position it inside of the DraftKings app. And so, even though we have other customers, because we're a B2B business, DraftKings has been, without hesitation, I would say the most successful at using it, because they've learned exactly, things like what markets work the best, and where to surface the betting opportunity in the app, just because they've been at it longer. So it's a very natural transition for us. And over time, right, they're obviously looking at having the product exclusively. So we have to get through all of our terms on the existing B2B business. But ultimately, this is going to be a product differentiator for DraftKings going forward. And like I said, the product has worked extremely well within their ecosystem, and I think that we'll be able to have refinements that make it work even better over time.
And where do you see your role going?
Like I said, they have been pretty clear about the desire. Part of the deal here is around the team and the tech. In fact, I saw Jason, on Bloomberg the other day talking about the value of the transaction being around the team and the technology, which is exactly right. And when it comes to the technology, I'm definitely the least important in that, right? It's all of our smart engineers and operations folks that really are the heart and soul of the company. So, my role is just going to be to help make the transition and make sure that we're delivering on the promise. And obviously, I've got a lot invested in the business as the founder, and want to make sure that this goes well over the next few years.
That sounds good. Yeah. What other areas from a technology standpoint are you most excited about expanding to that you can offer new services or new ways to interact with betting?
Well, I think one of the new, I think what you're going to see from just the betting community at large, right, is this focus on, what I would describe more as like contextual
Mm-hmm.
betting, right? So that is, essentially personalization, like knowing knowing that I'm a huge Yankee fan, right? And knowing that I love Aaron Judge, and knowing that I've bet on Aaron Judge's, you know, at bats in the past. Like, so in other words, surfacing to me at the right time, in the right place, the right markets for me to bet on the Yankees and Aaron Judge, right? Like a more personalization. So I think that, you need lots and lots of data on the customer side, right? On the user side to do that. So having that, like knowing my tendencies, right, on DraftKings based on my betting behavior over time will allow for that type of contextualized betting and surfacing it to me at the right time. And that, and I think that's a really exciting opportunity that our technology is in a the right position at the right time for.
Mm-hmm. And just the last question that I have, Chris, are there like personal goals that like over the next, let's say 5 to 10 years that you want to accomplish? Like, where do you see yourself going?
Well, that's a good question because I've been asked that quite a bit the last couple of weeks. Like,
Yeah.
what's next? And I will tell you that, these are hard things to do. This has been a really hard journey. It's 6.5 years, and
Hmm.
it was a grind. So, one thing I always try to look at my life in like 5-year chunks. But I do. The only thing I have planned right now is to take a little bit of a breather here for the
Yeah.
next few months and make sure that this transition goes well. And I have another business, a media advisory and investing business that I still have that for sure I'll spend more time on now that this is headed in the right direction.
That sounds good. Well, Chris, I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I'm excited to see where Simplebet goes, but also where you go and what you do next. I think that you've already done a lot in the sports space. You've created a platform and also a company in the media avenue that's really transformed the landscape today. And I'm sure the other areas you'll be in will be impactful, whether through investing, advising,